let's get to Ukraine. Some troubling front there in terms of President Biden making a comment while getting his 5th booster, of which I will be elaborating on in my monologue, asked a question about what Russia would do in the event of a tactical nuclear weapon, what the United States response will be. Here's what he had to say.
The dirty bomb allegations from Russia as it relates to Ukraine, do you believe that this is the beginning of a false flag operation? Is Russia preparing to deploy a dirty bomb itself or a nuclear weapon?
I spent a lot of time today talking about that. Let me just say, Russia would be making an incredibly serious mistake if we're to use a tactical nuclear weapon. I'm not guaranteeing you that it's a false flag operation yet. We don't know. But it would be a serious, serious mistake.
Not guaranteeing the false flag. I read some interesting analysis around the whole dirty bomb thing, which is that they threatened it before. Apparently, this is only the 3rd time that they've said happened so far in Ukraine, although it did not ever rise to the level of the secretaries of defense and the chiefs of staff speaking. Still no current indication yet. On the U.S. side, no sign of backing down. Nancy Pelosi, speaking at the International Crimea platform just 2 days ago, actually reiterated not only U.S. support for Ukraine, but actually for Ukraine pushing out Russia from Crimea. Let's take a listen to that.
In an unmistakable statement of the free world's unity that we stand with Ukraine. This platform was established to bring about the end of Russia's occupation of Crimea and to restore control of Ukraine over the territory in full accordance with international law.
Well, it just shows you that the U.S. policy is very much frozen in past rhetoric. Obviously, that's been longstanding U.S. policy, but I think it takes a different tenor whenever you're actively supporting Ukraine in the war. Like I said, in terms of the military conduct, there has not been any significant change on the ground in the last couple of days. The only major indication is this dirty bomb rhetoric being thrown around at the highest levels of the Russian government, including President Putin yesterday in a speech in Moscow. All eyes are going to be on Putin. He does his famous, yearly dialogue with reporters. It's actually one of the only times he ever gets anything even close to like real questions.
Oh, interesting.
And so he'll give a big speech about his views on foreign affairs. It's going to be long and tedious, but the more important and interesting stuff is going to come from dialogue. There also was an interesting interview yesterday with Krystal Amanpour and the Russian ambassador to the United Nations. He said Russia will not use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, although a lot of the analysis said that he was talking about that in the context of a first strike nuclear. But if they come up with a pretext for a dirty bomb, then they could say, well, this is a second strike. Russia is only responding to something in kind. So look, this is a diplomatic situation. Just because it disappears from the headlines for a couple of days doesn't mean that it isn't still a nightmare behind the scenes. And I think that's what we're seeing.
I also, with Biden, it's so hard to know how intentional his words are.
Yeah.
But I also was troubled by the fact that he's asked about a dirty bomb, which is not a nuclear weapon.
Yes.
It includes, radioactivity, but it is not a nuclear weapon or a tactical nuclear weapon. And he, of his own volition, brings up they better not use a tactical nuclear weapon. I found that troubling because that indicated to me that, they are very seriously concerned that that is a possibility right now. Otherwise, why do you bring it up? And then with regard to Pelosi's comments on Crimea and Ukraine, this is one. Listen, the U.S. policy has long been official policy. This is all Ukraine, never officially accepted that Crimea was Russia's, but de facto on the ground, that was the reality. And Crimea has been treated as sort of a special case throughout this war. There's been a lot more reluctance to, directly strike there. That's why the blowing up of that bridge was such a big deal and so sort of provocative and potentially escalatory and kind of a scary situation for the time, even though, obviously it was a huge win for the Ukrainian military. But Putin kind of screwed himself over by annexing those 4 regions or pretending to annex or legally annexing or however you want to put it. Because then it created less of a distinction between Crimea. He was sort of trying to put these 4 regions in the same bucket as Crimea. And it made it so that there was less of a special, special consideration of this one particular region. So I do think this is in some ways, a problem of his own making. There's a sense that the Russian people also are sort of more attached to Crimea as like part of their land than the eastern parts of Ukraine. There's more of a historical, this is really our territory, these are our people. They're also, we shouldn't deny the fact that prior to all of these hostilities, even Western media outlets would acknowledge that a lot of people who lived, Russian speakers in Crimea, actually were more favorable to Russia and were, more inclined to be part of Russia than part of Ukraine. So that's why Crimea, when we talk about that, it's sort of a special deal and why it's seen as more escalatory when the U.S. says, no, we really directly are also committed to providing Ukraine with the tools and weapons and what they need to be able to push you all the way out of there as well. It's a maximalist aim. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, especially from a military perspective. It was effectively de facto U.S. policy and Western policy across the board that, don't approve of it, never going to recognize it, but there's not much you could do about it.
Right.
So to say now that there is something you could do about it, look, we'll see. I tend to think it's much more of a red line than what the other Russian ones. But as you said, it's Russia's fault for putting us in a position of ambiguity as to what's real and what's not. So don't be surprised whenever your red lines get tested and then you don't do anything that people don't take them seriously.
Yeah.
It's a slow burning problem on both ends.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.